Hello, and welcome to my alternative version of our reflection essay. I was really excited to be able to do something a little bit different with this, starting in the uh, writing the short story class. I was able to do videos for discussion assignments and realized that I really enjoyed doing that. For some reason, I love to write, obviously, but for some reason, when it comes to things like essays or discussion questions, talking out things on video can sometimes lead to a different sort of conclusion, and I realize things and think of things as I'm going that I may not have done otherwise in my actual writing. So I'm really glad to have been able to take some time and explore my journey here at UCall for my master's degree in professional creative writing. And, I just think that reflecting this way has really helped me to put together all of the classes that I've taken and what I've learned from each one of them and the ones that are going to help me in my future career. So I've done a PowerPoint presentation and kind of gone over each of my classes, the assignments that we did in them, some of the readings, and just my general takeaways from each of the classes that led to where I started to the progression and where I am now that we are almost done and are in our capstone um, class for my degree. So I'm really excited to share all of that with you and hope that you enjoy my journey as much as I have. So I was lucky enough to take the writing life as one of my first courses here at UCall. And Paige Lambert, who is the instructor of that course, is amazing, and I'm really glad that I had her for one of the first courses that I had here. Coming off of a BA, I was a little bit intimidated, to start a master's program, especially at such a prestigious college as, DU is. I've admired it my whole life. So I was a little bit nervous, and to tell you the truth, the first couple of weeks of classes, for the first time in my academic career, I was really worried that I wasn't going to be able to hack it. And Paige really helped me to get past that and to work together with my um, classmates. And the course itself really helped when it came to learning about why I wanted to be a writer, which is something that I never really considered in the middle, as I was doing my BA and all that. I wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't sure what kind and how and why. And this class, really helped me with that. The reading material is some of the best that I've ever encountered. It's it was the perfect introduction to the program because the From Where You Dream by Butler is perhaps one of the most influential books that I've ever read that really changed the way that I write. I was never as in tune to the sensory detail that I was using until, we explored that book. So that was absolutely really helpful. I completed my learning goals in that class. I learned a lot about active listening, which is something that I'm not great at doing, but which as a writer is imperative. And that really was cemented for me in this class. And now, I pay attention to everything that goes on around me. So that's something that I really learned in that class. And it was great to work with Paige, who is really hands-on and really one-on-one and gives you great feedback, and that's one of the best ways that I can learn. So, met my goals in the program, still trying to improve on my active listening from that class, but as I said, it was a great introduction to the program for me, and I learned a lot. I did annotate my very first signature assignment in that class was part of a series that I've been thinking about and working on since my BA. And in my opinion, it was abysmal. It was terrible. I'm surprised that Paige was so, encouraging with it, but it's just really great to see that starting point and then, as we'll get into later, see the ending point of where I have come since the writing life. And, I'm going to go back and read the books that we had in that class again because I'm sure that they'll be even more, telling and helpful to me going forward. Now that I have a lot more experience under my belt, I really want to go back and, look at Butler again, Francine Prose's Reading Like a Writer, and of course Annie Dillard, who is amazing. So that class was a great jumping off point for me and really, started the basis of my experience here at UCall. So the other class that I took my first quarter at DU was the writing the screenplay, which I was extremely excited for because writing screenplays is something that I do hope to do in my writing career. So I was really excited. I wasn't sure going in what my idea for my screenplay was going to be. I do like to try to have an idea when I go in, check through the syllabus and see, what our final product is going to be. But for the screenplay, I didn't know. I did take a screenplay writing class in my bachelor's degree and wrote a bit of a screenplay about my character Cal, who we'll talk about a little bit later. And, for me, it didn't work as a screenplay. I didn't like it as much as I think that it would be in novel form. So I didn't want to take that and try to do that again. So, I thought about all of the things that I'm interested in when it comes to writing and decided to do something historical. So I chose the subject of Christopher Marlowe because there's so many Shakespeare, you know, uh, adaptations and things about his life, and I really think it's interesting to explore some of the characters around him. And Christopher Marlowe is one of the most interesting characters. He has a mysterious death, which, like I've told everybody, I'm really interested in historical mystery. So um, I wanted to explore the idea that Christopher Marlowe did not die when they said that he did, and that he did write plays for Shakespeare. So, I started with his younger life. I did a lot of research, which was really fun because it's one of the things that I like to do since I like historical fiction. So, I read a lot of things and worked on a lot of things and really learned a lot about writing a screenplay, which is a completely different bird than, any other medium when it comes to writing. The literature, well, I guess it's not literature, the reference material that we had for this class was amazing. Sid Field's book on screenwriting is something that I go back to often and reread. It really changed the game for me when it came to screenwriting, and also Pope's book on good scripts and bad scripts was really interesting for me too. I would take a script that I found on the internet and kind of try to do the same thing that Pope did and, evaluate the pros and cons of how the screenwriter did certain things by using his model. So that was really helpful for me to learn in that program. And it's something that I still use, when I watch movies. I'm looking at the structure, I'm thinking about Field, I'm thinking about Pope, and I'm really unfortunately hardly watching movies anymore as a civilian movie watcher, and now I watch movies in a way where I am trying to figure out what they're doing and why they're doing it, and where they're hitting certain acts and things like that. So this screenwriting class was definitely more in depth and you know helped me to grow as a screenwriter. And the practical things that we did in class were the best way for me to learn how to write a screenplay the correct way. So that's this class is definitely something that I'm going to always remember and always know and use when it comes to my professional pursuits in the industry. And I'm really thankful that I took the class with Reese Livingston. He was amazing. His feedback was great, and he was really encouraging, even saying, that he would hook students up with producers and things like that. And that's not something, that you can get in any course. So definitely the instructors at UCall are something that made the experience amazing. And I really enjoyed this class and took a lot away from it. So, with 1 quarter under my belt at UCall and some really in depth and amazing classes, I started spring of 2017 with Research in Humanities. This class is not part of the uh, master's track anymore. So, when I found out what it was replaced with, I am in one way, a little bit disappointed that I didn't get to take the class where we talked about author branding. But I also think because of the type of writer that I want to be, that Research in Humanities was maybe the better option for me because I want to write historical fiction, and with that comes tons of research. I've read that people take 10 years researching things for their historical fiction books, and it's a little bit concerning for me because I don't want to spend all of my time researching and not having any finished products. But, when it comes to historical fiction, it's very important that it's accurate and that you're keeping in line with the truth of the era that you're looking at. So I've always been really interested in the 1950s and 60s and that era of America. And so particularly I'm kind of obsessed with Marilyn Monroe. And there's a lot that goes into her life and things of that nature, but one thing that she was a part of that I've always wanted to learn more about was the McCarthyism and the House of Un-American Activities Committee, and their uh, what they did to Hollywood when they decided to pretty much persecute Hollywood directors and writers and things of that nature um, for communist sympathies. So I did a lot of research. I probably read, you know, 15 sources, watched, movies that were considered, to be communist sympathies at the time. And it was really amazing to learn all of the things that went along with the HUAC trials. I've always wanted to turn that into a screenplay that hasn't been done yet. And I think it was a really interesting time in America, a time where, you know, things went a little out of control. Of course, Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, is, you know, based on that. So I thought that was really interesting how he could take one era and another era and put them together and make something completely different, which I think is something that I would love to do with my own writing. But the research that went into this course was intense, and the paper was long, and we had to do, annotated bibliographies and things of that nature. And it was a really great experience to learn how to research correctly and to take all of the different elements that you find and learn and put them into something, you know, as large as a research paper. And I think that it could work the same way with my historical fiction. Definitely in this class, I utilized outlines, which is something that I don't do as much for my regular fiction, but it's good for historical fiction to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. So that was also helpful and something that I'm going to use in the future. Absolutely. Definitely met my goals for the class. The paper ended up very in depth and gave me a basis for what I want to do in a more creative sense when it comes to the subject. So there's always room for improvement when it comes to research and learning how to take all of the things that you've learned and put them into something more creative. So in a way, I'm glad that I was still part of the previous program and did get to take this class and did get to hone my research skills, and make something, you know, out of it that I can be proud of. So, unfortunately, I didn't get to learn about author branding, but I did get to do something that is going to further my career when it comes to historical fiction. So, along with research in humanities in the spring of 2017, I also took the writing for the stage class. It is an elective that I had always planned on taking, and to tell you the truth, thought that the reason that I wanted to do that was because it was going to be kind of an add-on to the writing the screenplay class. However, writing for the stage is completely different than writing for the screen. I learned a lot, and one of the things that I learned was that I do not want to write for the stage. Um, it's kind of a thankless profession. It's very hard to break into. It doesn't pay well. Not that that's why I want to write, but I don't think that it's fair how little the stage writing pays. I think that it's a really important medium and it's something that should be more celebrated. However, it is not for me. I enjoy the class. I had it with Carrie Prince, who is one of the coolest professors I've ever had. She was a very, very great with feedback and really helpful. What happened in this class that did not happen to me in any other of my classes at UCall, which made me learn so much about how I needed to approach classes, is I started with an idea that was a bit of a historical idea. It was about a kind of love triangle between a 1960s, like ad man and a rich white woman and her maid, who was an aspiring singer. I wanted it to be a musical. I wanted it to have 1960. I obviously I am not a musical composer. I don't write songs. I am not musical. So I wanted to use actual songs from the 60s. The first 5 weeks of the writing for the stage class, I focused on that idea, and all of my assignments were about that idea. Halfway through, I realized that it wasn't going to work correctly with the music aspect, and I was thinking way too cinematically, which was a problem going into that class in the first place. I was making a movie for the stage, and that's not what stage writing is about. So halfway through, I changed my idea and started completely over. Luckily, it worked out for me because Carrie was such a great, cheerleader, and she was so helpful, and she really helped me to make sure that I didn't fall behind and that I was able to catch up and able to make out of this new idea what I had started with the old idea, but it was a very eye-opening experience to start halfway through the course with something completely new. I decided to use the idea that I have for a television series about my real job, which is in property management. It worked, but it didn't work great. I don't feel like writing for the stage is for me. Definitely, I'm more cinematic, and that's something that I learned from that course, and something that I can check off my bucket list. I tried to write, I tried to write a play, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. But it did help me realize that I am interested in, screenplays and teleplays and things of that nature, which take some of the elements and move them forward. However, I absolutely adored reading the plays. I voraciously ate them up, and after I read those plays, I also picked up Goodnight Mother and Drive Me Miss Daisy and Amadeus, and I have a whole repertoire of plays now that I have read because I just so enjoyed reading them. I would say that I would like to work in the stage industry, maybe as a stage director or a producer, just not as a writer. Um, and I'm obsessed with the plays, and it also did something for me that is really interesting and gave me an idea for a blog that I do now, which I'm woefully behind on, but hopefully when school's over can work on more. But basically, I found out all of the best adapted and original screenplay winners. Many of the adaptations, sorry, are based on plays. So what I do is I read the book or I read the play and then I watch the movie and then I write a blog about it. So despite the fact that the course overall was a little bit difficult for me and I had to change tack, I did learn so much and it helped me to you know, think of things that I want to do in my future, such as studying plays and studying their adaptations and, writing about them and hopefully creating some myself. So, in the end, I did reach my learning goals, um, but I learned a lot more about myself as a writer than I did about myself as a playwright. So, it was definitely worth it and gave me a huge project for my blogs in the future. So, taking fiction fundamentals concurrently with Masterworks fiction was probably one of the best experiences that I had had to date in my program because all of the stuff that you learn in Masterworks, which we'll talk about in the next video, um, really go well with what you learn in Fiction Fundamentals. Fiction Fundamentals is a little bit more about, characters and POV and structure, things of that nature. We read a lot of short stories from the best short stories of 2016, which was really good for me because I'm kind of bad at short stories and I don't read them a lot because I don't write them a lot. But it was a good experience to read a lot of short stories and really focus on the elements of fiction that go into them, that make them work. It was helpful to me so that I could, consider writing more short stories in the future. But the short stories we read are really great. One of the cool things about fiction fundamentals that I haven't experienced in other classes is that there was a group project. Of course, I took the writer's workshop this quarter as well, but the group project was more of a almost like what you would do in a typical classroom setting where you work together with a specific group to make a presentation instead of, working together in a workshop scenario. So that was really fun. The story that I got was The Great Silence, I think it was called, something like that. It was about a parrot, and it was one of the saddest and most beautiful things that I've ever read. Really telling in this day and age. And the group that I worked with was really good. We made a presentation, so that was something new to learn. But in this class, I also worked on my, I guess you could call it my main piece of fiction that I am hoping is going to be the first thing that I publish. It's a novel about a boy named Cal, and he is from the 1950s, and he is gay. Um, and so this is something that I think is really interesting when it comes to historical fiction because it's not just, a story of, the war or things of that nature. It's taking something that's more modern, a gay character, and putting it in a historical setting. And I think that is something that will resonate well with historical fiction, buffs as well as people that read literary fiction or other kinds of fiction. So I was really excited to work on it. I got to work on it more in this class than I had in my BA, which is really nice because it is a story that came to be from a random, like, in my first screenwriting class in my BA, we had to write just a bunch of log lines, just make things up on the spur of the moment. And this is something that I made up just randomly and has become something that I want to publish as my first work as a published author, as a novel. So, it's something that has been brewing and worked on in different classes throughout both of my degrees. But I really got to take a second in fiction fundamentals to focus on it. And I was really happy with the outcome. The professor, Jessica Roeder, was also one of the most hands-on, I guess you could say, professors. She gave the most intense feedback, I mean, line by line feedback on my writing, which is, a lot of professors don't have time for that, especially in larger classes. And it was really just something that was so helpful for me that really helped me to learn and to understand some of the things that I was doing incorrectly, the things that I needed to improve upon in my writing. And it's something that I go back and look at often and read through the line by line that she had done on my last version of Cal. That is going to be something that I take with me forward as I continue to work on Cal. So it was a really good class. We read some really interesting short stories that I enjoyed a lot, and got to work on that project that means a lot to me. So it was a good experience and something that I'll take forward. Oh, and Narrative Design by Madison Bell, I believe, is one of the most interesting books. It's a lot like what Pope did with his Good Scripts and Bad Scripts book, where it takes a piece of writing and breaks down each paragraph and tells why it's doing certain things, what enhances the structure. And we read certain parts from it, and I ended up going and reading the rest of it. And it's something that I will use as a reference going forward because it teaches you how to break down a story by element and really show why an author is doing certain things with their structure or their characters or their POV or whatever. And it's something that is really beneficial and has been beneficial to me going forward with my own writing. So that one jumps off my shelf often when I want to evaluate my own writing. So, Masterworks Fiction with our esteemed director and Colorado's Poet Laureate um, is a class that changed the game for me when it came to my writing. Now, I'm not sucking up. You just happened to teach a class that made me realize the things that needed to go into my work and make it a more cohesive whole. So this is a class I hadn't taken the literary genres class, so this was the first class that introduced me to the elements such as transformational arc, persona, all of them, um, field of action, configure time, and learning about them so in depth really made me realize how each one is used in a story or a novel or a screenplay and how to go forward and do that in my own writing. This class was imperative. It's the point in my transformational arc where my writing really changed and where I really started to see a big difference in what I was doing going forward. These things were always in the back of my mind after that, so it made it so that, anytime I wrote, I was thinking, where's my transformational arc and how is my voice and does the voice match with the story and do my characters have good personas? Is the narrator the right thing? Is the POV the right thing? Where do I want to go in terms of configure time and where's my field of action? It was a game changer, a lifesaver, and the stuff that we read helped with that as well. It was an amazing introduction. to some of the masters of fiction. I had read Virginia Woolf before, but I was too young to understand it. Loved reading that. I had never experienced Borges before. He is now one of my favorite writers. I loved going through each of the kind of schools of thought, but more, genres almost, and going, from uh, the romanticism to the realism, and then, going detectives and suspense and fantasy. We ended with Conversations by Cesar Ira, one of the most innovative and interesting books that I've ever read. So it was really great to see the transformation over time of these great works of fiction, and inside of them study each of the elements that made them what they were, and think about my own work and what I want to do with my writing, and emulate some of the greats, and focus on genres. Of course, a little bit later in literary genres, that's a little bit more apparent, but really kind of think about myself and what I want to do with my writing and where I want to go with my genre. It was one of the hardest courses. It was a lot of reading, and, quickly to get into a pretty intense um, discussion each week where we had to break down a lot of things, and do earlier in the week. So I took 3 classes that quarter in the autumn of 2017, and it was a little bit rough. Made me realize not to do 3 anymore. But Masterworks Fiction was one of the best classes that I took here, because it was intense and it was hard, but it was extremely enlightening and extremely uh, cohesive. And every week I knew what I was doing, but it was a different set of elements and things that I had to look at, and it's something that I still think of and I still remember, authors that I still read, and look for these things in all of the work. So this class is something that going forward, like I said, changed me as a writer a lot and made me think about a lot of things that I need to focus on in my own work. So thank you. So I really enjoy workshops and workshopping my classmates' stuff. I, I like being workshopped, and I like when people are completely honest with me and they take the time to read what I've written, and actually give me really good feedback. Which the one of the great things about this program in UCall is it's just kind of a smaller group of people, so you see a lot of the same people in subsequent classes, and you really get to know each other's writing, each other's personalities, what they're looking for in a workshop. So I'm glad that I took this class kind of in the middle of my degree, so that I already knew some of the people, and their writing, and could really dial down to what they were looking for in their critiques. I don't know. Back in the day when I was younger, I've always been an avid reader, but I never wrote a lot. So I thought, what kind of career is there where, you take your love of reading, but you're not necessarily, I didn't think I was creative enough to be a writer. Of course, that's changed over the course of my bachelor's degree and my master's degree here. But I used to think maybe I want to be an editor. So these kind of things are really interesting to me because I really love to look at other people's work and give them constructive feedback. Of course, in this, I also received my own, which I thought was really great. There's just a huge sense of community here in this program specifically, that I really enjoyed, and that really helped me learn, about my own work from the point of view of my peers instead of my professors. And I think that was really important, to growing as a writer. I think that it's a skill to be able to look at other people's work and, dial down to things that they might need to improve on, and having the understanding of giving them constructive feedback that is, respectful and helpful to them and not either beating around the bush because you're worried about hurting their feelings or, being rude and mean and making them feel bad about their writing. So I really enjoyed doing the writer's workshop and learning with my classmates how to critique each other because this was one of the first classes that there was a workshop element. So I enjoyed that. The portfolio that we ended up creating by the end of the course is probably one of the most telling things that I've done because it has a little bit of everything in it, a little bit of each part of what I want to do with my writing in the future. There's a fiction story that I came up with by watching a random Netflix documentary and thinking that the story was really tragic and interesting and that I would love to turn it into something fictional and different. There's a couple personal things, like a personal essay and a bit of a memoir that were included in there. My attempt at poetry, which is always abysmal. I just like stage writing. Poetry is just not for me. But the portfolio that I came up with at the end, I was really proud of because it was a culmination of a lot of different genres and aspects of my writing and what I like to do all in one place where I could easily go through and, show somebody in the future. Look, I have this skill set when it comes to historical fiction, but I can also write creative nonfiction and, personal essay and things of that nature. So I really like that. And then one of my favorite things that I did learn in this class as well was the difference between modular and linear stories in novels and short fiction. I did not realize that 90% of the time in my bachelor's degree and up until this class that I write modular stories. um, I guess it's just so interesting how much this degree teaches you about all of the little aspects that go into writing and what you're doing. And as a writer, without these kind of these things that you learn, you don't even realize what you're doing. However, once you take a class like the writer's workshop and you learn the difference between modular and linear or memoir and personal essay, you can really take advantage of that learning and use it to move your fiction forward or your nonfiction and make it better than it was when you were just blindly writing modular fiction like I have been doing for years. Now I can actually structure it in a way that makes sense, combined, with all of the other elements that you learned or I learned in other classes. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me in the writer's workshop, but I also, again, really enjoyed the community and the working with my peers to help better each other's work. So this was a good one. And the sorry, and Annie DeWitt, who was the professor, was extremely hands-on and has a career of her own and is someone that is a really good asset to the students. So I'm really glad that I had her in that class and the people that were in it and all the things that I learned from it. So it was a good one. That makes sense. Combined, with all of the other elements that you learned or I learned in other classes. So literary genres for writers was an interesting class that I really enjoyed. It seemed like it was an add-on or maybe like a class that went well with Masterworks fiction. It had a lot of the same um, discussions and assignments when it came to uh, studying the elements that we talked about, like transformational arc and all of those. except for instead of going in order of schools of thought like Masterworks Fiction did, each week we studied a different literary genre. And I think that was a really good thing to do for writers to kind of figure out what their niche is and where they fit well into it. I definitely enjoyed reading the different genres and imagining myself writing different genres that I hadn't have considered before. So it helped to improve on some skills that I don't really have, such as poetry. So that week was a little bit hard, but rewarding when I got to work on something that I need to improve on and at least try. But I really enjoyed the readings that we did in this class. It went in an order to each genre, and then within the genre, we studied different parts of it. So we read two plays. So after the writing for the stage class, I was enjoying reading plays again. And these two were really good. It was Copenhagen and Disgraced. Disgraced was perhaps one of the best that I've ever read, and I'd love to see it live. But what really surprised me is how much I enjoyed the two novellas we read, which were Woman Lit by Fireflies and Goodwill. The novella to me, and of course we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about my novella class, but the novella to me is an interesting genre. It's hard for me to understand the difference between a novella and a novel, if it's just word count, if it's the type of writing it is, and I think that reading these two novellas specifically showed me how novellas differ from novels, and that was really helpful because it made me realize that my writing is more in the realm of actual novels, but that I do enjoy reading novellas, and that they can help me to kind of toe the line between short story, novella, and novel. And that isn't something that I had understood before or really studied when it came to my reading and how long things were and what the subject matter was. So I really feel like the self containment of the novella was shown to me in this class, and I enjoyed that. And it, of course, helped me when I actually got into the writing the novella class. But I also enjoyed, all of the other stuff that we read, even the poetry. It was fun to go through each genre and think about what I wanted to do with it and use those elements that had so changed the way that I looked at writing to actually study different genres. So it's something that I still use when I read, and try to establish what genre I'm reading and how it fits into the scope of what I want to do with my work, and what I want to do with future work and all of that. So it was definitely a good add on to the Masterworks fiction class, and with the two of them together, when it came to reading all of the different works that we read throughout them, I think that it helped a lot with my writing in general. So it was a good class, and Tim Early is a really fun professor. So, along with literary genres, in winter of 2018, I also took the Writing the Short Story class, which I was terrified to take because I think that writing short stories is one of the hardest, but also most rewarding and most impressive things that a writer can do. A short story is not easy to write, especially a good short story, something that takes you through all of the literary elements in a short space of time is extremely difficult. And that is a skill that I am trying really hard to work on. I prefer to write longer pieces. I think that I want to be a novelist and a screenplay writer, but I think that it's important for all writers to have lots of different tools in their arsenal, and the short story is one that is imperative to have if you want to be a good writer. and it's a difficult one, particularly for me. I do have trouble with it. So Jeffrey Schwartz was my instructor for this. I took another class with him the semester after. He is amazing, and he actually made me like the short story, enjoy trying to write one. I really liked the stories that we read. It was the first class that I've taken where we read kind of more modern stories, which really helped. I do like to write historical fiction, but I'm also interested in young adult and supernatural and that sort of thing. So I I did like reading some of the more current type of short stories. We read things from Stephen King, from Roald Dahl, T.C. Boyle, Elmore Leonard, which I did not think I would ever like, but it was really good. And then some young adult stuff by like Kelly Link and Laura Lippert, and it was just really a cohesive type of different short stories so that we could get a good range of what a short story could be, which I thought was really nice. And it was really helpful to me as a terrified short story writer to see kind of lots of different ways that it could go. For my short story for the class, I took an idea of taking some songs that I liked from the 1960s, It's My Party and Judy's Turn to Cry, and turning them into a short story. So it was really fun. It was really campy, which Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz even, mentioned to watch the campiness, but it was kind of what I was going for. So it was really interesting to do a short story that I was actually kind of proud of, and I was really invested in the idea, and I think that it worked out pretty well. It was different from my normal historical fiction, and was a little bit more like shock value and horror-ish and campy. So I had fun writing it. It definitely needs work, as all of my short pieces tend to do, but in the future, I really do want to learn how to effectively write short stories. So, look, there's a cat. Sorry. So it was good to be able to practice here and to have a good base and to have great feedback from a good instructor, so that in the future I won't be so terrified to write short stories. And I'm not as much anymore, and I hope to try some more in the future. So last quarter was my last time for normal classes before the capstone, and I did have to choose my last elective. Unfortunately, what I had hoped and been planning on taking since the beginning of my program was the literature to film class, and it is not available and will not be until next year. So I didn't want to put off my whole degree program specifically for that elective. So I did choose the memoir course. I was pretty excited for it. I do have an idea for a memoir. I have a pretty cool story. I was adopted. I found and met my biological parents when I was 25. I'm now close with all of them, my biological mother and father, my 9 brothers and sisters, tons of aunts and uncles, cousins. I've done my ancestry family tree. So it was really cool to learn all of that after growing up without knowing any of that, and really know, where I came from and all of my family. It's very interesting to me. But what the story that really interests me is my adoption itself. I was adopted by a couple who couldn't have children, so I was, a real blessing to their lives. However, my biological father did not want to give me up for adoption and was not given a choice. So I really think that the juxtaposition between, the heartbreak of him losing a daughter and the joy for my adopted parents would make a really cool memoir. Long story short, sorry for the rambling. Um, the memoir class is not exactly structured correctly to be able to really explore the art of memoir as it should be. I'm not the type of person who thinks a final project needs to be, 100 pages or anything like that. However, the final project in the memoir class is not long enough to even come close to a tip of an iceberg of exploring even part of a memoir, let alone a full memoir. I don't know if, the other classmates that I had just weren't as engaged as previous classes. If the professor and I maybe didn't, we weren't on the same level. The books that we had to read for it are something that I definitely want to go back and explore. It was The Art of the Memoir by Carr and Memoir Project. Those books are going to be something that I am going to want to come back to and read again in the context of the memoir that I really want to write, as opposed to the assignments and whatnot for the class. Um, Luckily, it was an easy class because, as we'll talk about in my next video, the novella class was a lot. So it was nice that for the memoir class, the class load was a little bit less. However, I almost felt cheated by that class because it it didn't give me a good sense of how to write a memoir, what people are looking for, what kind of ideas work, you know, how to structure it, how to, really navigate writing a memoir. And that makes me sad because, after all of the classes that I've taken here, um, even the ones that, you know, maybe won't benefit me later in life, like writing for the stage, I still learned a ton. I still gleaned so much information. I still read plays, and I'm so interested in it now. The memoir class, I did not have that experience with, unfortunately. So, my final project for that class was a short piece that sort of talked about my adoption, some memories from when I was younger, and then, you know, it just was. I'm not proud of the piece. I hardly remember what it was about. I hardly remember writing it. I remember some of the classmates' work that I read and tried to critique. It just, all in all, it wasn't something that I enjoyed, and I think that there's a lot that could be done with that class to make it a more cohesive class for people that are really interested in writing memoir. Because if they went to that class, that's a back burner idea for me. I do want to explore it at some point, but if a student went to that class really wanting to learn how to write a memoir, I think that they would also be quite disappointed. So, it happens. If there was one class out of however many I've taken that just wasn't great, that's to be expected. Um, but I am grateful that I was introduced to the two reference works, and I'll be going back to those. So, unfortunately, not the best experience, but still something good come out of it. And last but certainly not least, we have writing the novella. So, besides Masterworks fiction, this is the most work intensive, difficult class that I have ever, or that I took in my program. However, it was an awesome class. I had Jeffrey Schwartz again, who I already knew, and I kind of knew what he was looking for and, how he would be able to help me. Um, it is the longest piece that I have written to date, so I really felt accomplished at the end of it, even though there's some stuff that I want to change about it. It was an accomplishment to me to spend that much time and effort and energy on a piece that um, I'm hoping to turn into a novel. I know that was a writing the novella class, and I did write half of it or whatever I was supposed to write, but I really think that it could be expanded and turned into an actual novel. Of course, like I said before, my ideas of the difference between a novel and a novella are pretty I mean, I think they're pretty close. I think that there's more to it than word count. And when it comes to the structure of a novella, I think that what I'm writing or what I wrote for this class specifically is more suited to a novel. I actually am pretty much planning on um, working on it for the capstone. So hopefully, I can get some good feedback on it um, as a novel instead of a novella and work to fix some of the things that sort of went awry with it. I had it set up a certain way, and Jeffrey suggested something different. I tried it out, and last, I took the summer off. So in the spring, when I read it, I did like the way that it was going. However, annotating it again for this class, I realized that I was right in the first place, and I need to switch up the structure and go back to how it was. I think that's really cool that if you leave something for a little bit and come back to it with fresh eyes, you can really, make the changes that need to be made to it. So, that being said, I'm really excited to continue to work on what I started with in the novella class. Like I said, that is one of the hardest classes that I've ever taken because much like the Masterworks, well, I guess there wasn't as much writing, but what this class does is not only do you have to work on a novella would in a length that is longer than anything that we'd ever been expected to do before. We also had to read novellas, which are longer lengths than, what we normally would read in class, and then do the discussions by midweek. So it was a lot of work. It is a lot of reading and then a lot of discussing that particular whatever we read, plus working on getting huge chunks of writing done. So it was challenging, and it was challenging in the best way because it made me realize that it is possible for me, even while working and, running a business and going to school, that I can read a lot and I can write a lot. And I really enjoyed doing it so intensively. So I need to make sure that once, we're done here, that I continue to read a lot and write a lot and move forward the projects that I've been working on, specifically this one from my novella class. I love the novellas that we read. It it was I actually enjoyed the novellas that we read in the literary genre for writers class better because I think that they more like cohesively showed what a novella is supposed to be. However, in this class, like we read the Cloud Atlas, and I personally, uh, they were trying to say that the Cloud Atlas is a lot of little novellas put together, but to me, it's a actual cohesive novel. Agatha Christie's works are short, but I don't know if I call them novellas either. I think they're short novels. So, when it comes to novellas, I think that there's some pretty specific stuff that needs to be present for it to be called a novella. And I don't think that word count is the only way to look at it. So I'm still kind of learning about novellas, and the difference between them and short novels and what works for me. But I mean, I definitely met all the goals in this class that I set out to achieve. It was really, it felt like such an accomplishment to turn in a 30-page piece of work. I mean, of course, with, the playwriting and the screenplays, they're that long too, but not 30 pages of prose. That is the most I've ever written, and it was really fun and made me realize that I'm excited to do that, for a living. Um, so it was hard, but it was worth the hard work, and I'm hoping that I can, in this class, fix the things that I had changed that I shouldn't have changed, perhaps get closer to finishing it and getting it to, publishing point. So, good class, very hard, but has given me a product that I'm really excited to work with. Quite the ride it's been over the past 2 years here at UCall. As you can see from my videos of each of my classes, I have learned a lot, come a long way, from the first couple classes of the writing life and writing the screenplay to, the last couple, particularly writing the novella. there's been a huge change and growth in myself as a person and myself as a writer. I feel comfortable now, sharing my work and writing and workshopping and, trying new things, which, I think that writers often get stuck in boxes, and I don't want to be that kind of writer. I want to be able to explore all of my many interests and many genres and mediums and different ways of writing. And I think that this program has really given me a good basis of being able to do that and being comfortable in each one of them. You know, even classes like the memoir and, writing for the stage made me, realize the things that I want to do with my career and the things that I don't. But either way, I learned something from each one of them. And I think that I have really great value when it comes to being a writer. I know that a lot of writers, well, I'm sorry, a lot of students in this program are getting this degree to teach or to do other things besides writing, but that is not what I want. I want to be a writer. I want to quit my day job. I want to write for a living. And I think that the building blocks have been set up during this program so that I can successfully do that going forwards. I've grown so much over the course of my degree. I've learned so many different things. I've read so many different things that have opened up, my reading preferences, even um, that have made it so that, my writing has changed for the better. I've met so many learning goals. I have a 4.0 GPA, which I'm hoping to keep after this course. I've been really proud of the work that I have done and the time that I have spent. And although there's always improvement that needs to happen, I need improvement if I want to, work on poetry or short stories. Even with my sensory detail and some character development and things of that nature, there's always skills to improve on. But I feel like the stepping stones to get to where I am have been imperative and just so helpful to establishing what I want to do with my career, what I want to write, and um, I'm really sad that this program is over. It's been such a great experience. I've met so many amazing people that I'm going to keep in touch with, professors as well as students, that have really helped me on my journey, and I couldn't have done it without them. So, I'm proud of what I've accomplished, and it's been just an amazing program for me to really delve into what I want to do and who I want to be as a writer. And I guess from here forward, I really need to take the reins and make sure that I am writing all the time, reading all the time, and trying everything I can to make a career out of this, subject that I have spent so much time and effort on, between my BA and my master's degree here. So that is the plan. And I am so grateful for everything that this program has given me. I have not always been big on reflection, so this particular assignment really helped me going back and looking at the courses and the work that I did and the assignments and the growth that happened between now and then is very obvious to see when you take the time to go back and reflect on it. So that is also something that I want to take forward in my toolbox, my arsenal, um, to continue to reflect on the things that I'm working on and the things that happen in my life that could, help with developing my writing even further. So it's been a great journey, and I'm so glad that I did it. And I'm looking forward to completing this capstone and looking back on it later in life after I've become successful. Thank you so much.